You're watching Stratnew Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Adrian Zenz from Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the US. He is a senior fellow with the China Studies at Victims of Communism. And more importantly, his research paper, Sterilization, Forced Abortions, and Mandatory Birth Control, the Chinese Communist Party's campaign to suppress Uyghur birth rates in Xinjiang, is what we are talking about. Thank you so much, Dr. Zenz, for giving us the time.
Thank you.
If I can actually start from your conclusion, which is something that even the last colonial governor of Hong Kong has endorsed in terms of, under the UN conventions of definition of genocide, both of you and many other people do believe that this is what is happening, if not like a mass killing in the normal understanding of it, but slowly over time, systemic. Is that correct?
There's a systemic effort to depress population growth among the minorities, coupled with an effort to bring in a large number of Han Chinese settlers to the region. This situation and atrocity, we used to call it cultural genocide, and it is cultural genocide. But in light of the new data, we must reappraise the situation and acknowledge that we have evidence of what one could potentially call demographic genocide.
Dr. Zenz, give us a little bit more of understanding here. Now, it was in collaboration with the Associated Press. You were looking at data, Chinese government data, which I do believe it was directly from in Mandarin. The Associated Press was looking at witnesses, whether it was victims, whether it was guards at detention centers, other families. It was a collaborative effort. So just describe to us how the systemic work of genocide has been happening in the Xinjiang region.
Already last year, we had a significant number of witness statements of Uyghur and Kazakh women who were able to escape the region and testified about being forcibly fitted with intrauterine contraceptive devices, of being forcibly required or coercively required to accept sterilizations, and of the fact that this was not just incidental. However, we didn't have direct evidence. We had some statistics about declining birth rates, dramatically declining birth rates. The new findings, however, on the one hand, we now have even more detailed witness accounts of this being a systematic policy. But for the first time, we have government documents. For example, women were saying, we are threatened with internment if we don't pay high fines or if we have violated birth control policies. Now we have government documents that say exactly that. Women have said we were forced to accept free sterilization surgery. Now we have government documents that say that that is happening on a systemic scale.
Dr. Zenz, birth control and China have been associated together even in the past, till that policy was really abandoned. But here you see what in your research over the years, a reversal in terms of the Uyghurs. Is that something you would agree with?
Birth control in China has been ongoing and has been relaxed most recently, as the Chinese government is trying to promote 2 children now. Uyghur regions have had among the highest population growth in China in the past years. And this has been a real eyesore in the sight of the Chinese officials. Now we see the extreme opposite. Not only the adoption of or the enforcement of existing or previous birth control policies, but a massive campaign to systematically depress birth rates and to push population growth rates close to zero.
That's absolutely astonishing, unbelievable. But it's coupled again, as you mentioned earlier in this discussion, with the Han population and a reverse discrimination of sorts in terms of they don't have the same policies and they're being brought in like it happened in Tibet, and you've elaborated on that in another work as well.
Yes, we have a strategy of settler colonization akin to what we saw in the 1950s. In 1949, Han Chinese population shares in Xinjiang were very low, just a couple %. The region was dominated especially by the Uyghurs and other ethnic groups. In the 50s and 60s, the Chinese systematically brought in settler colonial groups, the paramilitary Xinjiang Construction and Production Corps. And now, most recently, since 2015, we have a more clandestine development of suddenly Xinjiang's permanent resident population, in the sense of people who have their household registration elsewhere, who have come into Xinjiang from outside of China. Between 2015 and 18, a total of 2 million of these have entered Xinjiang, and no ethnic breakdown is given, no other demographic breakdown is provided for this particular demographic group. But they've all settled in Han Chinese areas and have been attracted by promises of high salaries, good jobs, and free housing.
And some of the horror stories that have come out, again, because we have to keep stressing it's the scale. It's not just the numbers are absolutely astonishing here. Whether women are talking about how they are scared when they go to sleep, whether there will be a knock on their door, their neighbors are being taken away, other women. There's a search not just for materials that could be used in radicalization, but there's a search for children that's going on.
Yes, having too many children is not just a policy violation in Xinjiang, it's a crime that the police are going to come and drag you away to an internment camp or prison if you've violated it. It's being punished as if you are a severe criminal.
When you talk about the government documents, there are two particular, I think, areas within Xinjiang where you found this evidence of actually systemic, whether it's IUDs being used or in internment camps or other camps in the villages where women have been forcibly either sterilized or anybody even above birth-giving age is being involved in this.
Yes, evidence of forced IUD insertion is very widespread, but two particular Uyghur regions have issued family planning documents that contain specific targets for sterilization, thousands, with plans to sterilize, in one case, 14%, in another case, 34% of all women from rural backgrounds who are of reproductive age, meaning between ages 18 and 49. And that is extremely serious.
And the systemic effort is to, you said zero birth rate, that's the goal, is to repress, to suppress the Uyghurs and other minorities in Xinjiang and I presume in other areas of China as well.
Other areas of China, I do not know.
Right.
But in Xinjiang, in at least one Uyghur prefecture, the stated goal was to reduce the population growth to 1 per mil, which is just barely above zero. In another one to 2.9 per mil, which again is like a tenth of what it was. In other regions, the official growth target is actually higher, but the real population growth is very low. There's a discrepancy. And the discrepancy, I think, is something that the Chinese government is actually hiding.
I want your comment, Dr. Zenz, even if it's not directly related to your research, in terms of the larger picture of what China is doing. Now, Xinjiang, Tibet, we've seen, but its aggressiveness, not only within China, but outside as well. We've seen what's happened with Hong Kong, and you yourself have commented that it's like the wall is up again and there'll be decades of repression. Taiwan, South China Sea, we've seen what's happened in India. Is there some kind of thread that we can see in why China is behaving like this?
Yes, we see a dramatic new trend, both domestically and in China's foreign policy under Xi Jinping. Under Xi Jinping, China has become so-called more assertive, but I think what it really is, it's a reassertion of anxieties that we saw manifest during the Cultural Revolution. It's almost like a kind of a witch hunt mindset of demonizing those who do not fully conform. And this internal logic is playing out in persecuting domestic dissent, but the same logic is spilling into foreign policy and how China deals with other countries, with increasing aggression, with intimidation and threat, and trying to punish any deviance from its own stances.
So how should the world be dealing with that, Dr. Zenz? We've seen like IPAC, the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, has published your research. They've called for a UN investigation. You and others are saying that this qualifies for genocide under the UN conventions. How do you deal with specifically what you have dealt with in your research, the Uyghur problem?
There's a need for systematic pushback. There's a need for nations to come together, to speak out together, and there's a need to confront the United Nations with these facts and to use multilateral bodies. There's a need for nations to stand together to face up to China. Because if China gets away with this atrocity unpunished and with no consequences, it emboldens the Chinese Communist Party to become more and more assertive and aggressive internationally.
In your research, could you give us a little bit more in terms of the funding that the Chinese government is using in the Uyghur province for what it's doing on birth rates?
The Chinese government has poured several hundred million Chinese yuan into providing free sterilization and IUD surgeries. And it has set aside 1.5 billion Chinese yuan as financial rewards for women who accept sterilization and intrusive birth prevention soon after they've even had the first child or without having had any child.
Again, Dr. Zenz, we do know, the Chinese propaganda machine, whether it's CCTV, CGTN, the Daily all the other publications that the Chinese Communist Party uses. There, they have from, I think, even January and even lately after your publication of your research, accused you of being, and they've used an organization called, I think it was Grey Zone, to accuse you of being a far-right person and part of a far-right organization, and U.S. intelligence uses your research in things like Xinjiang. How do you respond to that?
Well, I guess that is the only line of attack they have on my character, because they cannot refute my research, my findings, or my analysis. So I kind of feel sorry for them. I can say that I'm an independent academic working to do normal research. And that's all I can say about that. I feel sorry, because if you can only attack somebody's character, it really shows how pitiful your position is.
Dr. Adrian Zenz, again, appreciate you sharing your research with us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you likewise very much indeed.
And for all our viewers, just a reminder that you can follow all the latest news and analysis from an Indian perspective on our website, Stratnew Global. Follow us on our social media handles, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as well. And if you want to get live notifications for videos like this, as soon as we put them up, just click on the bell icon on our YouTube channel. You're watching Stratnew Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.